Hey everyone, welcome to the second ever episode of PowerPointers with Dan Weaver. I'm still your host, Dan Weaver, and today we are talking about one of my favorite topics, formatting. Now, if you've ever worked in PowerPoint, you know that formatting can take your deck from the equivalent of watching paint dry to the equivalent of watching a very nice color of paint dry. But it can also be a huge pain to deal with, so I'm going to show you 5 nifty tricks in the hopes of relieving some of that pain. And the 5th trick, in my opinion, is one of the best ever additions to PowerPoint that you may not even know about. Here's a quick look at the 5 topics I'm going to be talking about in this episode. Let's go ahead and get started with aligning shapes. Aligning shapes is a helpful thing to do if you want to keep all your detail-oriented friends and coworkers from losing their minds. If you are trying to present something important but the alignment is just slightly off, you can guarantee you will prevent some people from being able to concentrate. When you are presenting your content, you want your audience's undivided attention, so this is definitely important. First, select a shape or shapes that you want to force into alignment. Then you can either open the Home tab and from the Drawing section click the Arrange button and then hover over the Align option. Or you can open the Format tab and from the Arrange section click the Align button. By default, if you have one object selected, this Align to Slide setting is checked. This means that any alignment option you choose is going to align the shape relative to the slide, which is this white area on the screen, which is the same area that will display when you put the deck into presentation mode. So if you click Align Left, the box aligns to the very left of the slide. And if you click Align Bottom, it aligns to the very bottom of the slide, and so on. If you choose Distribute Vertically and you only have one object selected, it responds the same as if you were to choose Align Middle. If you select multiple objects, then open the Align menu, you can see that Align Selected Objects is now selected, which means that the objects will align to one another as opposed to the slide. So if you click Align Right, the shapes align to whichever one of them is the farthest to the right. If you click Align Top, they align to whichever one is located in the highest position on the slide. If you choose to align center or align middle, PowerPoint will split the difference between the selected objects to find the center or middle. Now, if one object is bigger than the other, and the smaller object is sitting within the directional range of the object it is aligning to, such as if this smaller box is within the vertical range of this larger box, and you align them vertically by clicking Align Middle, the smaller box will align to the middle of the larger one. However, if the smaller box is outside the vertical range of the larger one, and you try to align them vertically, PowerPoint will again try to split the difference between them. If you want to evenly distribute the space between shapes, you will need at least 3 objects selected. Then you can have the distance between them distributed evenly across a vertical axis by clicking Distribute Vertically, or you can have the distance between them distributed evenly across a horizontal axis by clicking Distribute Horizontally. You can select multiple objects and change the setting from Align Selected Objects to Align to Slide, and now any alignment options you choose will align all these selected objects to the slide instead of to each other. So you can center them all in the slide at once by clicking Align Center. However, if you want these objects aligned horizontally, clicking Align Center will stack them on top of each other, which is why I recommend keeping the default setting for shape alignment as it is, then grouping the objects together, and then clicking Align Center. Because the objects are grouped, they are aligning to the slide as a single object. Now, if you took this group and aligned it to the vertical middle of the slide, you can see that it's not evenly placed between the other elements on my slide because the header and footer I created are not the same size. So what you can do here is select the header and the footer along with this group, and then choose Distribute Vertically. And now these boxes sit evenly between my existing slide elements. You could also ungroup these set of boxes and distribute them vertically between the header and the footer. But as you can see, you may end up with different spacing because PowerPoint is spacing each individual element evenly instead of as a single object, like when they were in a group. If you want to get real fancy, you can even align multiple groups the same way you can align multiple shapes. I can create 3 of them in groups, then distribute them evenly as well as align them. Then, if you want to align all these separate groups to the slide, you simply select all the groups and group them again. Now they are a single group, which allows me to align them to the slide again. And when you're done, you can always break them back down to their component parts by ungrouping them. If this grouping stuff is at all confusing, feel free to watch my first episode of PowerPointers, which is about selection and covers grouping as one of the topics. On a side note, you may have noticed as I've been moving these shapes around, thin dotted red lines will appear. Those are not figments of your imagination, they are smart guides, which will help you eyeball alignment on the go. They show when edges are aligned, when spacing between boxes is even, and so on. But it's very easy with a flick of the wrist to accidentally misalign the boxes after the lines have appeared. And sometimes the lines don't show up when they should, or too many show up. For this reason, I usually feel it's easier and more trustworthy to use the alignment tools from the menu. I look at the red lines as a verification, but not as a guarantee. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about my good friend, the Format Painter. If you've created a shape and added lots of various formatting to it, it can be difficult to perfectly recreate all those various formatting tweaks onto other shapes. You could copy the shape and even change the type of shape it is by clicking the Format tab, then from the Insert Shape section, clicking the Edit Shape button, then hovering over the Change Shape option and selecting the new shape you want to transform your existing shape into. But if you already have your shapes laid out and you want to just Bob Ross your way to making them all simpatico, happy little shapes, then you can simply use the Format Painter. First, select the object whose format you want to copy. Then open the Home tab and from the Clipboard section, click the Format Painter button. If you click the Format Painter button once and then click another object, the formatting from the original object will be applied to the new one, and your cursor will return to a regular pointer. However, if you double-click the Format Painter button, then your cursor will remain as a Format Painter until you hit Escape, or click the Format Painter button again, or click on the screen where an object doesn't exist. Keep in mind, though, that when you paint the format of one object to an object of a different size or shape, some of the formatting may not look as good. For example, this box has the internal alignment of the text set to be 33/100ths of an inch away from the top of the box, which works fine for a box that is almost 2 inches tall, but when you apply that same formatting to a shorter box, the text starts to jump out of the box. Another thing to note when using the Format Painter is whether you are selecting a shape or selecting the text within a shape when you apply it. If you select a shape and then click the Format Painter, your cursor will show a paintbrush next to it. And when you click another shape, the formatting of both the text and the shape will be applied to it. However, if you only select the text, then use the Format Painter, you'll notice that your cursor now has an I-beam next to it. And if you try to click a shape, nothing happens. You have to highlight the text you want to paint, at which point only the formatting from the text you highlighted will be applied, while the shape stays the same. Also note that when a shape has text formatting, the formatting will be painted even if the text is not present. So even if I delete the text from this box, the formatting you set up for the text is still stored on the shape, because shapes never forget. So when you use your Format Painter on another shape, the text formatting is still applied. Another thing you can do is Format Paint a group. So if you group these items, you can paint them all in one click. You cannot, however, use a group to paint other objects, mainly because a group could have any number of items with any number of various formatting combinations, and attempting to format paint all those variations would likely cause a tear in the universe. So as you can see, when you select a group, the Format Painter is grayed out for its own protection. Now, a few exceptions to keep in mind when using the Format Painter. Firstly, if a shape has text that uses different fonts, sizes, styles, or bullet levels, when you format paint with it, the Format Painter will only apply the first text style it encounters to the new shape. Secondly, format painting only applies format settings. It does not apply size, shape, or dimension. However, it can affect the size of a shape if the Resize Shape to Fit Text setting from the Text Options window is on. In this case, the Format Painter will apply this setting, which in turn can adjust the size of the shape depending on the amount and size of the text within it. Like demonstrated in the previous slide, this can happen even if there is no text present. The shape will still resize itself based on how big the text would be if you started typing. And thirdly, you cannot format paint a table's formatting, not to a shape and not to another table. Tables are stubborn, and there are several PowerPoint tools that they don't get along with. You can, however, format paint the text within a table, like so. All right, moving on. If you tend to keep the same formatting on all your shapes, and you are tired of setting up the same formatting over and over again every time you add a new shape, or maybe you're even tired of Bob Rossing everything you add with the wonderful Format Painter, then you can benefit from setting your favorite formatting as the default. So if you like the formatting on this shape, for example, you can simply right-click on it, or control-click if you're using a Mac, then select Set as Default Shape. Now any shape you add in this deck will have the same formatting. And you can change the default anytime you want. This default is, however, different for lines. If you want all lines to have a particular default, you would need to set that up separately by inserting a line, changing its formatting, and then right-clicking on it and selecting Set as Default Line. Now any line object you add after that will default with the same formatting. One thing to keep in mind though is that if you create a new deck, the default for that new deck will still have the standard default shapes and lines for that particular deck style. Your defaults will not carry over to other decks. But what if you want your default formatting to remain the same in every deck? That is a good question for another time. But basically you would need to create a PowerPoint template deck and then set it there. I'll try to make sure I include that in a future episode. So that covers that. Copy and paste have been around like most things since before I was born, but it's gotten a little bit of a functionality enhancement in recent years. I can still take an object and copy it either by right-clicking and choosing Copy, or by hitting Control and the letter C on my keyboard at the same time. Then I can paste it by hitting Control and the letter V. But you can also right-click and choose from this Paste Options menu, which depending on what you have copied will vary. In the case of a basic shape like this one, we have two options: Use Destination Theme or Paste as a Picture. The Use Destination Theme option isn't very useful in this case. It just does the same thing as a standard paste would. However, if the shape is using one of your theme colors, which is this set of colors at the top of the Shape Fill drop-down menu, such as this green I'm using here, and you went to paste the shape into a different deck that has a different set of theme colors, then when you use the Destination Theme Paste option, the shape will paste in using the equivalent color from the new color scheme. So basically it's just using the color from this set of theme colors that is in the same position as the color I used. So this orange is where my green used to be, and this is the same way it will paste by default if I just press Control V. The other thing you'll notice though when I right click is this Keep Source Formatting option in the Paste options, which as you guessed it will use the coloring from the source that I copied the object from, which is my original deck, so we are back to green. The other paste option I have with a basic shape like this is to paste as a picture. But in the case of a basic shape like this, it's not very useful because I simply end up with an image that I can't edit in the same way as I could with the original, and it actually makes my file size larger. It is very useful, however, with more complicated graphics and text that I want to resize and that I don't need to edit. Let's take this fun design for example. If I wanted to make this much smaller, I could select it and drag the corners. However, my text starts to get all jumbled up. I could simply resize the text, but as you can see, the formatting begins to get a little out of whack as not all of it scales, such as this text spacing and the line thickness and the shadows. And it becomes even more discombobulated as it gets smaller. However, if you paste a copy using the picture pasting option, you'll find this graphic becomes a lot easier to scale. However, it can't be edited in the same way as the original was, so if you do this, definitely save a copy of your original graphic somewhere so you can continue to make changes to it if need be. You can find more image pasting options by clicking on the Paste dropdown from the Clipboard section of the Home tab and choosing Paste Special. There are also some text pasting options, but I'll get to those in a later episode. Alright, and finally, here it is, merging shapes, one of the best ever additions to PowerPoint, at least in my opinion, that you may not even know about. But maybe you do, I honestly have no idea. Either way, it's my favorite newish feature, and I'm about to walk you through it. But before I do that, I want to show you another newish feature, which is the addition of icons. If I go to the Insert menu up here, and then I click this Icons button, I will get the Icons menu, which has a plethora of different PowerPoint icons to choose from. Simply click one and then click Insert, or you can click many and insert many at the same time, and now you have that icon in your deck. I can resize it easily and cleanly because it's a vector graphic. I can change the colors, change the outline, add a shadow, all the other formatting stuff you can do with basic PowerPoint shapes. The only problem with this is if I wanted to make this character waving his arm, for example, that's not easy to do. I could right click on it, say convert to shape, click yes to the dialog box that opens, right click again, go to group and choose ungroup, and now right click one last time on the shape I want to change and click edit points. Now I have all the different points that make up the shape, which I can drag to change. So if I wanted to make his arm waving, I could do this. But as you can see, this looks horrible. Not great. He looks like he was in an accident at the nuclear power plant. What I could do instead is delete this guy and create my own stick figure out of the basic PowerPoint shapes, which I've done ahead of time. Now you can see here if I wanted to edit the arm to be waving, I can more uniformly do that edit. Simple as that. The only problem here is that unless I do a flat color, if I add any other formatting, like a gradient for example, or an outline, or a shadow, it shows all the component parts. It's not one smooth icon, it shows all the blocks I used to make it. Some of this stuff can be avoided if I just group the whole shape, but not all of it. The best thing I can really do from here to get this to look like one uniform shape is to merge the whole thing. What I do to do that is make sure this is all ungrouped. So make sure all the shapes are ungrouped. I highlight them all. I go to the Format menu up here at the top. Then from the Insert Shapes section, I click on Merge Shapes, and then I choose Union. And now it's one smooth graphic that's all merged together, and all the formatting applies evenly across it. One thing to keep in mind when you do this, though, is that it's not easy to unmerge these shapes. So what you should do is keep a copy of your working graphic. That way I have this dummy over here I can continue to edit, and then I have the final product over here. So I can use my final one, but I can still make edits to the dummy if I need to make other edits. As you may have noticed in the last demonstration, there were several other options in the Merge Shapes menu to choose from. I'm going to walk you through those now. First, I select all the objects that I want to merge together. Then I click on the Format menu, then Merge Shapes. The nice thing about most of PowerPoint's menu options is that you can usually see a preview of what they will do before you even click on it. So in this case, I can hover over Union, see that it will combine all the shapes into one without actually committing to that change. The other thing to note is that whenever I use any of these merge shape options, the end result will take on the formatting of whichever object I select first. So in this case, I selected the green circle first. When I go to Union, it takes on the final format of that first shape that I selected. I can do the same thing if I click the blue circle first. Now it has that formatting. So let's look at the other options in the menu. The next option after Union is Combine. Combine is a lot like Union, except that any overlapping parts of the selected shapes will be deleted and create a negative space. You can do some kind of cool stuff with this, but I honestly never use it because it's not super practical. The next option is Fragment. And Fragment is a lot like Combine in that the overlapping parts of the selected shapes are cut out. But in this case, they aren't deleted. And so you're actually left with all these interesting shape pieces, which you ordinarily may not be able to create very easily. Let me put that back together real quick. Now the next option is Intersect, and Intersect is sort of the reverse of Combine, so it cuts away everything and only leaves the overlapping pieces. It unfortunately does not work well with more than two shapes. So to demonstrate this, I'll just select two shapes and then go Intersect. And as you can see, it leaves the remaining overlapping piece from the shapes that I selected. Lastly, we have Subtract. I'll select my shapes, go to Merge Shapes and Subtract, and you can see it deletes the shapes that I selected second from the shape that I selected first. So if I selected this circle first and then the square will be deleted from the circle. Okay, now that we got the basics of merging shapes down, I want to kind of just walk you through a few things you can do with it. First one I'm going to try is to make a circular arrow. So I'm going to grab this donut shape here, get it to the size I want. I'm going to insert a triangle here. This is the head of one of the arrows. And then I'm going to create a secondary arrow along with it to cut out of the donut. Then I'm going to group these with my shortcut, copy it, flip it on the other side. Then ungroup both of these. Now I'm going to take my donut and take the two pieces I want to cut out of it. The Format menu, Merge Shapes, and Subtract. And then I'm going to merge these pieces by using the Union function. Select them all, say Merge Shapes, Union. Now I kind of have this nice circular arrow thing, which I can uniformly edit and format. Another one let's try is let's try to do a rocket ship here. The thing that merging shapes is good for with something like this is that often when you want to create sort of a custom shape, I can right click and say edit points, and I can start to kind of get the rocket shape going here. The problem is it's hard to perfectly imitate what I've done on one side onto the other. So what I'll often do is get at least half of this shape the way that I want it. Like so. That's being frustrating. Yes, like so. And then I'll grab a rectangle and split it down the middle. And I'll grab my first shape, then the second one, and do a subtract. Then I'll copy this over, flip it, and then kind of fuse them together. Now the bottom is not even. I want a flat bottom, so I'll just add another rectangle. Select my shape again, and a rectangle, and do a subtract. Now I got kind of the base here for the rocket. Then I will add in a fin by drawing by hand here. I will copy that over to the other side. I'll group them, do this and center them so that they line up. Then what I'm going to do is create a copy of the spaceship body and put one over here and another copy over here. I'm going to group those, group these, and center them again. And what I'm using these copies of the body for is to cut out the fins in a way that, as you can see, they kind of more aligned to the shape of the rocket. And I can also add a little porthole here, align those, and then subtract. Oops, wrong one. Select the body first, then the porthole, then subtract. And I can add a little booster at the bottom. Let's use this shape. Flip it over. Change that, center it, there. Now I can select each piece. I kind of have this, and do union. Now I have this kind of stylistic rocket that I can do a sort of a gradient fill on, whatever else that I want. Kind of give it a look there. The last thing I'll do is kind of make an icon that goes within a button. So let's say I create a button like this, and then I have maybe a character icon that I've pre-created, which I'll throw in here, and I kind of want it to fill that button. But as you can see, you know, this is a flat bottom and it doesn't quite fit into this circle. So what I might do here is extend the whole shape so that it overlaps the circle. Then I'll take the circle, create two copies of it. I'll grab both of those, I'll align them to the bottom of my first circle. I'll change the colors of these so you can see this more clearly. Make one bigger than everything else. I'll send that to the back so that you can see it. And then this one is the same size as the original circle. So I'll basically cut this out of the bigger circle by selecting the bigger circle, then the smaller one, and format, merge, save, subtract. And now I kind of have this cookie cutter. I'll bring it to the front. You can see it'll cut out this overlapping bit for my character. You could just use the donut shape as I did earlier, this one, but then you're sort of relying on your eye to kind of like line it up and make sure it hits the edges, which works fine, but I prefer it to be precise, so I do it this way. Once I have my cutout, I select the shape I want to cut, then the cutout, and I go subtract, and now this character fits perfectly into this button. So the last thing I wanted to show you was this little graphic that I created earlier of a cassette using a lot of those merge shape features. Just to kind of give you an idea of some cool stuff you can make. If I pull this apart, you can see all the little components that I made by doing cutouts and subtracting and merging things and using other little formatting tricks. And that's the end. Thanks again for joining me. I hope you learned something new, and I hope you'll join me in the next episode. Until then, keep on PowerPointing.